The liar. Dear beautiful people, I am Earth who speaks. Feel my presence in you, because I live and speak to you through everything you feel in and through your body. I am constantly connected with you, so feel me, for I have a heart that beats and an essence you want to receive in your life on Earth here and now. Allow yourself to be received by me. I am your mother in many ways, as I sustain you through the body that belongs to you. The language of your soul and the language of your body are, in fact, one. The soul, your higher source of direction and truth, communicates with you through your body. A human body is not just a physical thing, a lump of matter. It is a living energy. It itself is enlivened by, and carries, a knowing that comes from my soul. So when you incarnate in an earthly body, you bring your own soul knowing, your own understanding and development with you, and you pour that into the form of an earthly body which carries wisdom from me, wisdom about life on Earth, the laws that apply here, and about how energy flows and moves here. It is intended that your soul enter into cooperation with the soul of the Earth, with me, the one who is speaking. I am a tool for you, and you are allowed to utilize me. I want to help and sustain you, and to teach you to trust the voice of your heart. The heart is a part of your body, but it is also a gateway to the soul. Your belly is the place where your inner child lives, who is your authenticity, your deepest feelings, emotions, and desires, and your belly is also the gateway to the source of the life force. So see the body as truly a temple of the soul, a living temple. You are not alone, your closest friend is your body. It wants to provide you with all the information you need to live on Earth. It wants to help you to make choices based on what you perceive and feel inwardly. To come to rely on the wisdom of the body is perhaps your greatest challenge, because in the way you are conditioned by society and by the traditions of the past, you start thinking from your head, and you want to control and order life from there. But the living wisdom of your body is not to be structured and contained in that way. The body has its own dynamics. Today, I want to tell you something about the importance of listening to your inner child and your emotions, and about distinguishing between emotions that are pure, and come solely from the inner child, and disturbed emotions, or so I call them here, that do not come directly from the child, but rather are distorted and malformed by the thoughts in your head. These are emotions that come through an interpretation based on prejudices from external standards that corrupt and disturb how your emotional signals function. This is very relevant to you, because you know inside that it is best to follow your feelings. You try to orient yourself to your feelings, on what your heart, your soul tells you. Yet, at the same time, there are all kinds of resisting emotions through which you can get no clarity and which makes following your feelings no longer as simple as it could be. I would therefore like to make a distinction between emotions that arise directly from the purity of the inner child, and disturbed or interpreted emotions that have a different feeling, that are less direct and pure, and are often a combination of judgment and repressed emotion. I ask you to now go to your inner child and allow an image to emerge of how it is with her or him at this time. Your inner child is spontaneous. It allows its emotions to be seen without a filter. Reading the emotions of a child is not complicated. You can get it by glancing at their little faces: anger, bewilderment, anxiety, or enthusiasm, joy, pleasure. These are primary emotions that come unfiltered from the child. But what happens when that original stream is blocked, suppressed, or is redirected based on external standards? The child is being punished for expressing primary emotions, and this often happens during your upbringing. Most parents do not know how to deal with the power of primary emotions, so the redirected emotions take on a life of their own and a distortion occurs. To give one example, a child feels spontaneous grief. There is a concrete cause. Something cannot be or something is going wrong, and the child cries because it is upset. It shows its grief through tears and desperation. The parent says, "You don't have to cry, because," and gives the child all kinds of reasons why things are not so bad as the child thinks. The parent, the adult, tries to dampen the grief rather than embrace it. If the grief is allowed to flow out, allowing the child to become calmer, then the child naturally finds a way to redress the balance. The grief will not last forever, but it seems as if adults are afraid of the emotion and therefore immediately try to curb or nip it in the bud. But what happens to the child when that emotion is not allowed to be directly expressed or only partially so? The child attaches a judgment to the emotion, because the child comes to think, it is not good to express my grief. Being sad is actually not good. It should not be. It is unacceptable. The child then incorporates that lesson and will react the same way when it is again called upon to control its emotion or when it is reprimanded. The emotion does not disappear. It is a living energy that cannot be undone through the head, so the suppressed emotion remains and creates disturbance in the child. Instead of the innocent, spontaneous power that the emotion initially carried, it has now been subverted and has gone underground, and it will eventually carry a disturbed or even toxic force. When a child is continually reprimanded and instructed to systematically hide or control its emotions, there then becomes a reservoir of buried emotion in that child, and because of that, the child can eventually display disturbed behavior. An emotion wants to naturally express itself, and is not really a problem that must be resolved or removed, but a natural expression of the earthly body, a discharge. And the function of that discharge is very important toward restoring the balance between the body and the emotion. When you disrupt this discharge, it creates in the child, and later in the adult, a pattern of emotions which are blocked by the force of judgments that are continually relayed to the child and, now, also to the adult. An emotion wells up and immediately a force resists the emotion in order to contain it. It can be sadness, but it also could be anger, fear, or shame. It could be anything. When those emotions become subverted and are not allowed to be experienced or expressed, they take on a different tone, another charge. Long pent-up anger, for example, can become toxic, turn into bitterness and hate, or into cynicism and even depression. In depression, you are able to see the ultimate form of an emotion that was turned inward and never allowed to be outwardly expressed. The person no longer sees the source of the original emotion, because the connection with their inner child is beyond their reach. If you were to tell that person something like, "Listen to your feelings," then that would be a very difficult task for that person because of how separated they are from their inner child. Many of you are that person who has learned to keep their original emotions in check, to hide them, to block them, or to pass them for review by a roster of judgments that tell you what is allowed and what is not allowed. So listening to your gut feeling is not usually so simple or obvious. How do you make a distinction between the pure messages of your inner child and the disturbed and distorted impulses of the oppressive adult, who each of you have become to some extent? How do you recognize the difference between the two impulses? Go back to the inner child you saw in the beginning and feel its presence. Feel, for a moment, the innocence of this child, for it is very pure and natural. It is sensitive and vulnerable, but also very powerful and pure. It allows whatever emotions present themselves to act as a natural force that flows through them and then blow away. Where is the inner child located in your body? Feel that for yourself for a moment. From where does it speak, and how is it heard? The inner child invites you to kneel down to it with tenderness. A child naturally calls up tenderness, because it is so guileless. Innocence is what is typical of a child. Hold on tightly to this image of the innocent, spontaneous child who is not in your head, but in your heart or your belly. Now see what moves toward this child from within when you connect it with your head and the judgments that are still active there. What kind of flow streams from your head to your inner child? In each of you still live judgments from the past, things that you do not allow to be present, which make you think that what you do should be better or different. It is those compulsions that are imposed on your inner child, and as a result, the child feels uncomfortable and not welcome. Those instructions, which you have made your own about what you cannot and are not supposed to feel, still live in your head, although those instructions are not in accord with your emotional reality. So who wins? your original emotion or the dictator in your head that changes the emotion into something acceptable. What is happening in the energy field of your head is a lie, a masking of your original emotion. In this way, the inner child is put in a prison and becomes isolated, which makes connecting with your feelings often very difficult. You first need to be aware of the lie, or the liar, in your head, and this calls for a certain clarity in perceiving yourself, because what is, in fact, a lie, has been taught to you to be the truth. This is the way you have to behave. This should not be. This is not allowed. So you have to first expose the liar in you, and this requires courage and clarity of mind, because the liar in you has adopted an identity, a life of its own. This identity often determines how you present yourself to the outside world, but it is a mask, a false persona you have created to survive as a growing child and later in order to fit into society. Thus, in your life, there are two figures, whom I here call the liar and the original child. By labeling a part of you as a liar, I do not want to judge this aspect of you, because it is almost inevitable that it exists in anyone who grows up in the way described above. Still, it is a figure to be reckoned with. The liar sends all kinds of signals to you telling you what you can and cannot do. The liar discourages you from doing certain things and attempts to persuade you to do other things. And sometimes you go along with it, because you really think that it is the right thing to do. In order to find out if something is really true, it is extremely important to connect with your body and to look there for the emotional reality of your inner child. Try to feel the difference. If you are talking yourself into something from the liar, the tone is not one of love and gentleness, but is coercive, manipulative, controlling, and there is usually an undertone of anxiety and the need for imposing limits. On the other hand, if you descend from your head to your abdomen, the reality of the child feels much more open, gentle, and innocent, and much more stable and solid. Feel the difference in energy, the compelling, often impatient flow in your head, and the gentle, innocent, open, and more steady energy of the child in your belly. And make a firm decision to now choose for the child. To allow it to really experience everything it feels, and to see the power and the value of doing that, even though you do not know what you actually need when the child, for example, is very angry, sad, or confused. Let the child be, and do not try to restrict it. Allow the energy to work on you naturally through what the child feels, and try to remove your head when doing this. Then ask the child, what do you need to now have in your life to become happier, more joyful, merrier? What kind of energy is most helpful for this child? What does it need the most? Take the child in your arms, then merge with it into your belly. It is the messenger of life, it receives information from your soul and wants to pass this on to you in the earthly form of a pure emotion. Let go of the judge in your head, and believe in this child, and feel supported by the earth. I am the soul of earth, and I want to envelope you with love and power, and to invite you to again trust your original nature, which is as pure and innocent as the animals, the plants, and the flowers. Thank you so much for your attention. Channeled by Pamela Kribe.